What is up, everyone, and thanks for tuning in. In today's episode of the Big Ideas in App Architecture podcast, we speak to Jordan Thomas, who is the CTO and co founder of Kami. Jordan and I talk about Kami and how his company is making a difference in classrooms around the world. Jordan shares about the beginnings of Kami to growing the company and how they're architecting their solutions for scale, keeping in mind the daily challenges of teachers in every classroom around the world. So pump up that volume and get ready for an intriguing conversation with Jordan Thomas. This is the first time I'm having somebody come from the oceanic side, so New Zealand, Australia.
Down
I
under.
do. Yeah, down under. Honored to have you on the podcast. Before we close up shop for the season. So it's an absolute pleasure for everybody listening. Jordan is the CTO co-founder for a company called Kami, and without butchering what you guys do, I let Jordan kind of explain his role, the company, how they're changing the world. So, Jordan, why don't you kind of spin it up and tell us what you guys are doing?
Yeah, absolutely. So, Cami's the company that I started along with a few other people about 10 years ago at this point. And we're all about making teachers' lives better and making education better. So, we built this product which is used in classrooms, and essentially it's like a teaching productivity tool, you can think of it. So, most lessons will start off with some sort of resource that the teacher has, either publishers given them something or they've come up with something themselves, and they want a way for these students to really interact with this resource, pull it apart, show their understanding of it, put it back together, and then give that back to the teacher, and let the teacher give them feedback on it and give them ways that they could have done that better, or you know tell them what the great work they've done. So we have this platform that's used in classes to send out work, give feedback, and make that sort of much more interactive experience. A lot of the time when we go into a classroom, there are previous solutions that is literally paper.
Mhm.
And you may think that it's all gone digital and they've spent however millions of dollars buying devices, but in reality, a lot of that technology is just too hard to use, and the teachers
Yeah.
just go back to doing things the old way they've always done. So we're making it simple enough that any teacher can just move everything that they were doing digital and get so many benefits out of that. So yeah, our biggest market is the United States. That's always been our biggest market actually, but we're in almost every country around the world.
That's brilliant. While I was preparing to have you on for this conversation, I went to the Kami website and I was checking it out, and then I saw like you have these amazing features. So where you can annotate live annotations, and then also one of my favorite features was like a teacher can actually live do the assignment. And it can be for the whole class together at the same time. And the reason why I love that is my mother was actually a teacher, and she would teach elementary school, so from first grade to fifth grade back in India. And they used to do everything on paper. The kids used to like do it, and then she would come up with these bundles of paper back home to check all the assignment and score it. So my job as a teenager was to basically, once she's checked everything, to score everything up together and give somebody a total. So like if it was out of 50, I had to sum it up to like, okay, if we got 40, 45, whatever it was, right? And I was talking to her the other day. I was like, hey, you know what, there's this company called Kami, and they have built this app. She's like, oh, wish I had that when I was teaching it. And now she's retired. So I think in many ways, it's a very novel effort that you guys are putting to kind of build an experience, because we have so many courses towards students. Lots of people are building things for the student life, education. How can we explain something to a kid better? But on the teacher side, that's underserved. So tell me a little bit about, I mean, that's just my opinion, but tell me a little bit about how did you guys feel like you needed to do something? Well, like what inspired you to build Kami?
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with you. It's a very, very underserved market,
Yeah.
and so many things that you think are just really just basic workflows that in most other industries are solved problems are still not in education. And the amount of time that teachers spend entering grades into multiple systems, manually adding up grades, as you said, and all that time is not time that they're spending, with their kids, or that they're
Yeah.
spending planning the next lesson. It's just more time taken out of their day and making makes teaching, less of an attractive profession. So we thought it was really important to make those things as basic as they might seem, just really, really great experiences. And then obviously on top of that platform, we can build more and more exciting interactive things and bring in AI and do all these sorts of things. But off of a platform, we're just making teachers' everyday lives much, much better. So we started off with a slightly different product and direction. We were actually building things more for university students because
Mm,
that's what we were at the time. And we were in the sort of our final year university and found that the sort of the note-taking applications were not that great. We weren't happy with them, so we built our own one. And then as we put that out in the world and started iterating on it, we just found that there was this huge love that came from teachers for the product, which we weren't necessarily expecting. It was a slightly different slightly different direction. And when we started talking to all these users, actually we would early on, everybody who signed up for our product, we would send them an email and just say, personal email, not automated, but just for one of us, and say, hey, how are you liking the product? Why did you sign up? What are you using it for? And as much as possible, get onto a call with them and talk. And
nice.
we started to realize that the passion of the teachers who are using our product was just so high. And even with our product being relatively basic at that point, because we'd only built it a couple of months ago, they just really, really loved it. And we could
Nice.
feel that, and we could feel that, okay, here's an opportunity to do something quite significant. So
Well, that's brilliant. Yeah. So you were in college, four university friends, 10 years down. In 2022, you had, no, I was reading Times most influential companies of 2022, which is really significant, right? So, uh, so you were saying the ideation wise, you were initially serving the students, and then you felt like, hey, we have lots of teachers feeling like they need to do this. So, how did that turn into a more mature product? Like, talk about the little bit of the beginnings of like founding a company, right? Like, how did that go?
yeah, it's always it's always an interesting journey. And I think it's a different sort of story for us than it would have been if we'd been in the United States at the time.
Right,
It's a different funding market in New Zealand. It's developed a lot since that sort of 2012, 2013 period
right,
when we were starting out. But we um, rose a little bit of money from a few angels. We've been working on it without any money at all for a while, and just sort of throughout uni. But after that, it was like, okay, we do need to eat and pay ourselves something. So we sort of rose a small round, and we were very early on. We started trying to monetize in small ways, and mostly just as a way of validating, because if people are willing to pay for something, you have a better sense of the value that you're providing. So we sort of, through that, sort of started monetizing quite early, and we ended up being very sort of capital efficient throughout the growth of the company, which was
nice.
was was really good. We've seen a lot of competitors, and especially in the edtech space, who will go and raise large amounts of money, and then that comes with expectations of growing very quickly. If you raise a VC Series A, that's obviously what they expect. And in the education market, it often takes time for people to adopt products. It takes time to figure out how to really get into classroom. It's not an industry where people really like to change very, very quickly. So if you try to match it up to a VC timeframe, I've seen a lot of companies struggle with that.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
we
Were
sort of
there?
took a slower approach.
Yeah, I was curious. Were there any other companies? Because, as of course, the New Zealand market was like the startup scene was just kind of coming together, and I mean, compared to the US, it's like different market. Were there any examples for you that you kind of looked up to, and you're like, okay, these companies are companies that we can emulate? You were talking about them early on,
Um, I think there was definitely a lot of companies out there that I really admire and would emulate in different ways. I think
right?
things like Stripe and Shopify and the way that they do engineering were always, also because they're Ruby shops and we're Ruby shops, so I was always looking to them. I think, like, in terms of education companies, definitely some. Although I think, like, we weren't seeing One thing that surprised me at least was when we started going to more um, education technology conferences and things like that, and sort of you see the layout of the market. There's very few that are focused on like teacher and student needs and making their lives better.
Right.
Most of them are focused on administrators. Most of them are focused on um, like things that are not really that like relevant to the teachers and students and their actual learning. So yeah, there wasn't. There's a few companies that do have done really nice things, but mostly we were looking at companies in other verticals,
Yeah.
I guess.
Yeah, because when I was also thinking about what Kami is doing, right? In my mind, it didn't come to me like what are the other comparative companies who are trying to do, because it seems like what you are trying to do is directly affecting what's happening in the classroom on a day-to-day basis, and that applies to elementary all the way to school, yeah, like 12th grade, right? Like, I mean, what you're doing is directly affecting, which is why I was like, okay, this is something different for sure. And it was good to hear from you and understand that okay, it takes time. It's not like you can go into a school and say okay, start using a product. Adoption takes time. Habits have been built on for so many years. Did you feel like everyone who started to use the product immediately was like able to use it effectively, or did you feel like you had this, oh, we have been doing this traditionally for 20 years, this is how I teach and this is new? Did you face those kind of challenges, or not challenges but more like experiences that you heard from people?
Um, Yeah, I mean, there's definitely in any market, and probably even more so in education, there's a spectrum of teachers out there, right? There's some that are incredibly tech savvy. You wouldn't believe how tech savvy some of them are, and they'll adopt something when it's very early, right? Like our early versions were not the easiest to use, had different things that they had different flaws and different things you had to work around, and they would adopt it even despite those things and figure out how to make it work really, really well. But then a lot of those teachers will end up becoming sort of tech integration specialists or ed tech coaches within their schools,
Mm,
and coaching other teachers.
interesting.
And as they've made the product much easier to use, and we've had those ed tech coaches out there who have many of you are big fans of us and in our sort of heroes program, we support them. They are able to teach the teachers who are a little bit less, you know, and just take a little bit more help to adopt new technology, and
Right.
sort of get them over that hump and show them the value. And then once they're there and it becomes something they're used to using, then they are really happy with it and get that benefit out of it.
That's
But you
brilliant.
definitely just you see that you have this early adopter pool, then you have like an early majority, late majority, that sort of adoption cycle. We've definitely seen that play out.
Right. That's awesome. That's awesome. So I was thinking, let's go a little bit to your journey. Of course, you're now CTO, co-founder. Tell me a little bit more about what made you choose a career in engineering. Like, was how was Jordan's influences towards engineering?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I mean, I think that I started off. There's a lot of stories in my parents I feel of sort of I was doing all of the electronics kits as a kid, and
Yeah.
that was my big thing was all of the the kits where you get some resistors and a capacitor and you solder them together and you make some sort of circuit. And even before computers, 'cause I didn't really have a computer I could program at that point. Even before that, I was really into those. And then I think I discovered computers and software, and it's like, well, this is so much easier. Like I've
Yeah.
been spending hours soldering things together, and now I can create something with. I don't even have to get up. Like, okay, this is much better. So, I think I pretty
The
quickly
parents are
switched
like,
to
Jordan's not burning up the house. This is much more easy. He can sit in a corner and work.
yeah, not breathing all the leaded solder, which is probably more healthy too. So, yeah, and that was pretty early on. I think sort of by 10 or so, I was doing a fair bit of programming of different things, and so I was always building software from pretty early on. And when I went to sort of university or college, as you should call it, I sort of considered did I want to do pure software? Did I want to try to combine it with something else? Um, and like sort of more of like combine it with. Because I also really enjoyed physics. That was the other big lab, and it's like, do I try to bring in some more physics or
Right.
some sort of mechanical aspect? And in the end, it was clear. It was easier. It was just going to be a better path to just a pure software degree, which I did sort of a software engineering
Nice.
degree. Um, And I think sort of the entrepreneurial part also came through then of like I sort of been doing that separately. I've been playing around with different things and like doing the sort of the well, I didn't do a lemonade stand, but I did bake bread, so it's probably maybe close enough. Um, and you know, I'd sort of, and then I think at some point, you know, I got a internship into in Silicon Valley, San
Nice.
Francisco, just sort of um, during my degree after my third year. And I think that was the point where I sort of saw, oh, like you could actually combine these things, and you could actually raise money for an idea, and people would give you money just to go and work on this thing that was just an idea you came up with like 2 weeks ago, which had not been a concept I'd been exposed to before.
Right.
And I think seeing that was definitely
Yeah.
sparked
I think
some
so
thoughts.
many people don't understand the influence of Silicon Valley and just the atmosphere of being around people who are constantly looking at problems and like, oh, let me turn this into an idea. I mean, it's fascinating. You know, like I when I moved to the Valley, and I moved to the US in 2017, and within 2 years I was in the Valley and I was in kind of integrating and talking to all these people, and now I'm in the thick of things, talking to people all the time about ideas and AI, and they're trying to bring everything together, but they're talking about scale. So what I realize is that in early on you have this brilliant idea and you start building that, and then suddenly it becomes very real when you've taken somebody's money that you have to deliver something.
Yeah.
So once you guys did that, let's go back to talking about Kami a little bit. Like, how was that early product? Like, what technology stack you use, and how were you in the early phase able to show value back to the investors?
Yeah, I think like um, you know, we kind of had I guess there was sort of two, you know, very early on there was a phase of that first product we built that was more university student focused. And that was probably actually the only time we've done a complete throwaway rewrite. We sort of threw away that code base and built the new one, which was, you know, the first platform had been really like annotation and the sort of document part that people actually responded to quite well.
Yeah.
But we'd coupled it to this whole like course management thing and like, you know, trying to be an LMS and learning management system and trying to like, we were trying to do a whole lot of things that were not actually what people wanted. And
Mm,
we realized that actually the annotation part is interesting. The rest of it, we just should get rid of. So we took out that part and built as a new standalone product, which was initially a Chrome browser extension and still is, but now mostly just a sort of a PWA website. And we, built it out there. We built sort of a Ruby backend with Postgres as the database. Now Postgres and CockroachDB, but started off just with Postgres. And yeah, we've actually kept. I think the stack has changed a little bit. We're on Heroku to start off with, and moved to Kubernetes later
right.
on. But I think like I'm actually quite proud of like the amount of, you know, a lot of those initial database structures and things that I laid out 10 years ago are still, you know, haven't changed that significantly now.
Right. Right.
You know, the uses of them has changed enormously, but some of those fundamental things are still actually the same.
Right. And that's what happens too, right? Like when you build something and if the idea is pretty clear, right? I mean, what I've noticed is that pretty much the table structure, the design, you know, entity diagrams, pretty much everything is the same. What changes is the amount of transactions and the scale at which people are trying to use. I mean, which is a good problem to have. You really want more people to kind of start using your product. But again, starting with like, I would say a horizontal architecture where you have the application with like a simple database running is a good way to kind of begin, I feel. So uh, was that where you guys were initially? Like you were like, let's see if this got legs, and then think about changing things as we kind of need to.
Yeah, I think, I mean, there's always an interesting debate that goes on between like how much is should you optimize for what would work at scale when you're just starting out.
Yeah.
But I think like sometimes what people miss in that is that some of the things that help you get to scale, I don't actually think are any more work to do at the beginning stage.
Right.
Um, like, yeah, separating your database from your app and having a scalable app layer. I mean, if you're using Rails or something like that, actually that makes it incredibly easy, and it's
Right, right,
fast. And I don't think we would have saved any time going with, you know, Mongo or like by some of the more like you know, there's things like Hasura that sort of get rid of some of that database layer. But I think the time would have saved from that would have been very minimal, if any. Um, and you know, going with the SQL database, like, you know, okay, you need to define some schemas, but actually it ends up saving you more time
right.
than it costs you, and you're in so much better stead long term. So, but then I guess another I guess on the other hand, is like we went with Roku, which saved us a lot of time. Eventually, we had to migrate, but it was an easy migration. So,
Yeah, yeah. Oh, because you moved from Postgres to like Postgres, CockroachDB.
yeah, 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 and then yeah, we moved to and that was a relatively easy migration as well. I mean, would have been very easy if we weren't doing it in the middle of COVID and dealing
Yeah,
with enormous traffic increases. It
I
would have
know.
been a little bit less stressful, but no, it was definitely a good move for us.
Oh, that's a good point you brought up. Like COVID significantly was a very impactful year for Kami, right? Because I mean, everybody had to like work from home. And New Zealand, of course, had a pretty strict rules at the time as well. So, did you kind of see that's when everybody started of like looking at Kami as this amazing option to kind of start using for classrooms? Yeah, talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so I mean, we were already a successful product before COVID. You know, we had millions of users, and you know, and we have always been we'd always gone for that in classroom experience. Like we weren't a remote classroom product, but obviously it also applies very nicely for remote classrooms. And when you send all the students home, there's other options disappear. You have to go to something digital. You have to go to something that's really easy to adopt, and Cami was that tool for a huge number of schools. So we saw enormous growth over that period. Over a 6 month period, we had a 25x increase in peak usage. So I'm measuring peak usage there by like the per second amount, which is like that's the amount that the database is going to croak on. Is like what is the busiest second across that day,
Right.
and that busiest second increased by 25x.
Wow.
Um, and that was where we had you know I think we got probably 10 or 15x we were able to get out of Postgres, which was actually good. Like we did a lot of optimization. Um, but the thing about it was all write load, and we had a level of write load that was very very difficult to deal with on
Right. Right.
Postgres.
Yeah.
Just because we were like, I don't know how do you want to go into Postgres, but we were burning, you know, over 1 billion transaction IDs per day, and
Gosh.
Postgres uh, has to vacuum every you know every 2.5 billion or so. So
Yeah.
we were just constantly trying to do manual vacuums to keep up with it, and
Yeah, I mean that's a
it was
nightmare of a
nasty.
scenario to manage actually, especially when you want to scale the business and you don't want to work on infrastructure, right? Like, and you're trying to like burn fire, or like the fire's going and you're trying to put water and kind of fix it.
Yeah,
But yeah, it's great to know. I mean that you were able to scale. I wanted to jump back to a thing that you were mentioning previously, and I liked your perspective on it. Like early on when I have spoken to many other companies and folks, founders and CTOs, and I've met two types of folks. There are ones who are like you, who feel like, hey, the technology is not something that we need to prove, but we need to prove the idea and the use case and make that work, and then we can go from scaling it like as we get there. And then there's another side of people who have like the seasoned experience of working on Kubernetes. They have worked on 50 other databases, and they've worked on like 5 programming languages, Kafka, all those things, and they build like this really complex architecture, and they have the solution of how it will be implemented, but they haven't tested out if the use case or the app itself will be like functional. And I've seen more success in conversations from those people, around people who have focused on, like you, have clearly tried to see if this idea works, if this is really what the world needs. Let's get this working, and then we'll scale as we need to. So the question I wanted to ask was, did you ever have a point where you were like, uh, you know let's start thinking about scale early on, or was it always like, let's see if this works and then we'll get there?
yeah. I think it's interesting because to me, like it's like to me, it's I guess it's like to me it's a little bit more nuanced than just that because some things like Kubernetes, I think um, to me is not that complicated.
Hmm.
Not if you don't use it in a complicated way, it's not that complicated.
Yeah, yeah.
So if you're just starting out and you just want to deploy something simple, just do it on Kubernetes. Use autopilot on GKE or the equivalents on others. It'll be really simple, and if you need to run it 100 times scale than we are now, you'll have a path to get there.
Right.
So like there's some things that are not simple to do, that are actually simple to use at small stage and will scale, and some things that are just like too complicated and you shouldn't deal with. And it's a matter of figuring out what those things are. Um, but so what was your question? I kind of
Yeah, I wanted to get your perspective on, did you ever, like, within the
yeah.
architectural phase, like say 2-3 years into the company, felt like, okay, we need to, like, okay, now start thinking about scale. But it seems like you were already using Kubernetes early on, so you didn't really have to, like, think about making too many changes to where you wanted to go.
Yeah, most things that we encountered were not do not require major architectural changes.
Right.
I think that we'd done a few things right from the start around we had scalable instances of Ruby initially on Heroku, but later on Kubernetes. Kubernetes didn't exist when we started out, so it was Heroku was the best option. But yeah, having a scalable fleet of app instances, having a database with scalability that we can scale up only horizontally at first, but we had plenty of headroom there.
Right.
Mostly what we had to do as we were going through those initial scaling bursts was much more about just application optimization. Like, oh, we're doing some dumb query, it should have an index, or we need to rethink how we do this, or you know, no, those things didn't really require too much architectural changes. I mean, the other thing we did was we've always been very heavy on we use Sidekick, which is
Hmm.
a background worker framework for Ruby, and just pushing anything that's long running work or needs retries, things like that, just push it out of your main web request servers into
Processing. Yeah.
Sidekick, and run those as background jobs, and that makes things and much more reliable and scalable. And
Right, right. So,
um,
how did you make the decision to kind of architect it this way? Was it something that your team kind of explored, or you felt like this was, you had strength and knowledge around this particular set of technology? That's why you went with it.
yeah, I'd used Rails before. When I'd been over in San Francisco, I'd used Rails. And I mean, I'd used other frameworks before. I'd used Django, used various PHP things. That
Right,
once I saw that, it seemed clearly the best way. And I was the only engineer. Well, me and my co-founder CEO are the engineers, so there's no just convince anybody else. So
yeah. I mean,
um,
you're like, I'm the CTO. This is what we got to do.
yeah, this is what I'm going to do. It's going to be Ruby, and I like Ruby a lot, so
Yeah, yeah.
it was an easy choice for me.
Yeah, so I'm not somebody who's used Ruby a lot, but because I was working on data science stuff, I was more inclined towards, Python. And so Django was something that I used a lot with, like, Flask, but I never really felt it was good enough to do simple things, but it wasn't amazing. So I felt like every time I would go into forums or Reddit or, like, ask people, they all felt like they would prefer Ruby as, like, what they needed to use. So, and I think that was also a little bit of San Francisco kind of in there. So
Yeah, it's definitely. I mean, Python I think is also obviously a great language. I haven't used Django for a long time, so I couldn't comment on how it compares now. Though I think there's probably more like between like GitHub and Shopify and Stripe, and there's probably more large companies building big apps on Rails than
yeah, yeah,
any of the Python frameworks. And
I think
there's
so.
definitely a very nice thing about having it's very nice when there's a huge company that's dependent on the same state that you are and doing things in a similar way. Like a lot of our infrastructure around Kubernetes and stuff is quite similar to Shopify's, and I read a lot of their Shopify blog posts and stuff as I was doing
Nice.
that transition, because you know that they're going to have a big team dealing with all the hard, tricky problems, and you can kind of just piggyback off that a little bit.
I agree. I agree.
So
I think I've heard the same thing. I think the only company that comes to my mind that's using Python is probably Robinhood. I know Robinhood's used Python to build their app, and I don't know how
Yeah,
extensively, like what all they're
yeah,
using, but I do,
yeah,
it's
yeah.
interesting. Yeah.
I mean, certainly
So
if you're doing data analysis, like Python is a language there. So
definitely.
for the same reasons, you would use Python.
Right. Yeah. 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 That's awesome. So I wanted to jump back and kind of ask you, like, so now, Cami, start 4 people. You've got 100 people plus now at the
Yeah.
company. And is it like everybody is in New Zealand, or do you have like teams in other countries as well now?
Yeah, so we have about 70 of those is in New Zealand. All of the sort of product and engineering team, marketing team, operations, all of that, and then finance, etc. But our sales team is mostly based in the US, but also across the rest of the world. So we have a team of largely ex-teachers in the US who do a lot of work going into schools and training them on how to use Cami and how to just teach better with technology generally. And that's So that we found that we started off and we were trying to have like salespeople in New Zealand calling into the US, and
Yeah.
that was not very successful. Once
Yeah.
we hired Americans to do it, that was a big turning point for
I
us.
mean, it's time zone, man. It's like it's
Yeah.
something to deal with, right?
Yeah, time zone
It's a
matters so much. It always seems like a silly thing, like, oh, surely time zone, whatever. But like, it really, really matters. Like, you can't get around it.
100%. Yeah. So it's like right now it's early in the morning in New Zealand, and it's about 3 o'clock afternoon my time, right? So I think for a salesperson, especially, they have to be like they have high energy early on in the day. So if somebody has to do this at night or evening, it's a different experience altogether. Yeah. So was that one of your early on, like, so challenges wise, right? Like once you build the product out, and you're exploring markets, of course US is one of your strongest market. What was the challenge? Like sales was the biggest challenge, or getting, or was it and technology wise it seemed like you were pretty clear. Like what were the early challenges that you kind of saw?
Yeah, I think we were so we always had a very small team, and we had to be very efficient with that small team. And there's probably at some points our team probably should have been larger, but we were, some startups and startup founders always want to hire people, and they get a boost for themselves if they hire and make the team really big.
Yeah.
That wasn't our personalities as founders, so we sort of kept things small. So certainly, like, how do we deliver really good product with a small team was a big challenge, and we had to prioritize be very careful about how you prioritize things. A lot of talking to users and a lot of figuring out clever ways of solving problems that might be a lot easier to do than another way of solving that same problem. And then certainly we have a freemium model where people can sort of adopt our free version, and then teachers or students, individual teachers can upgrade, but also a whole school or a district or even a state can buy the full product. Um, and I think, like, early on, finding that mix of how do we get the free product and compelling enough that people will use it, but also have enough in there that drives people to upgrade to
Yeah.
the full paid product. That took quite a while to get right, and there's points where we would have huge growth in free usage, but it's like, oh, no money's coming in.
Hmm.
But those sorts of things we sort of got into balance eventually.
Right.
And then, I mean, certainly growing the team, as it is anybody who's, I think, growing a team past different stages. And I mean, I can only talk up to the 100 point, so people have gone much, much further. But things change so dramatically at different
Right.
points, and you really have to completely relearn how you make a company work. When you can have, you've under 10 people, and you can just all get into one room and sit around and figure out what it is you need to do, and then everyone knows and understands it, and then all the context because they were there. Like, that's completely different from even at 50 people, where
50 people. Yeah.
you can't do that. Like, you put 50 people into a room, you can't have a conversation where everyone gets to have input and you come to a conclusion. Like, it's just not possible. So
Yeah. Yeah.
it's everything has to change.
Yeah, but I mean, but it's interesting. I mean, that's the kind of problem you wanted, right? If you started a company, you never wanted to stay
Yeah,
at 10 people, right? So
yeah,
I think it's part of the adventure of being true to what the core of your identities when you're starting a company. And from what you're saying, it feels like you've always known how you wanted to build the company. And again, these are like good problems to have, but like retaining culture, retaining habits, and you know perpetuation is, it's all, these are all challenges that are good, I feel. So it's interesting.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
let's jump into something that I was really curious to kind of ask you, in terms of the cloud, and how the product right now is. Like, let people understand. They can go. Does it work like a SaaS product, or is it like they can self deploy it within their infrastructure? Say they're a district, they want to keep all their student data there. How do you guys enable it for everyone else?
Yeah, so we're a SaaS product. We're cloud deployed on Google Cloud. We haven't done on-prem. It's something like earlier on in different iterations of things, we were looked at more at some enterprise customers,
Yeah,
so about outside of education, and some of them were more interested in that. But schools don't generally have the no, they don't have the sort of the technical teams with the time free to do something like
to deploy
managing
everything. Yeah,
on-prem. So they're much more concerned about what are you doing with the data, how's it protected, and all those things, which we can do better if it's within our infrastructure. So yeah, we are cloud hosted on Google. Currently, all in US East, so we're sort of there, and yeah, it's sort of served off of there with we've got uh, Ruby instances running on Kubernetes. We've got CockroachDB running on Kubernetes. We've got some Postgres still running on Kubernetes. Using ClickHouse for data analytics, so
nice.
that's running there, and a bunch of Kafka and other Ruby things running around, and some
Right.
some Java things running around in the background. So we actually even run like instances of Chrome on our back end to do some rendering tasks. So
Oh,
yeah,
interesting. Yeah, that's
um,
very cool. Do you like, I'm assuming with the SaaS you will basically multi-tenant deployment for each company, or not company, but is it by user or by the school or something like that?
yeah, we are like yeah, it's a multi-tenant. So we're not deploying separate tenants for different customers.
Right.
Because like there's actually a lot of collaboration happens between customers. So it's sort of like it's one of those things that when we started hitting the scalability limits in Postgres, one of the things I did look at obviously was, okay, well, let's just take the busiest domains and split them off onto
Right,
separate
right.
instances. But you start looking at how many links there are between people in different domains, and it turns
Yeah,
out that teachers, they know the teacher in the school next to them, or or the school that's a couple miles down the road. They're sharing things back and forth all the time, and
right.
we don't want to stop that sort of collaboration. I think because schools are one of the things about schools is they're not generally in competition with each other.
Mm,
They don't see the next school, even if it's a different district, they don't see them as competition.
that's a good point.
They're
Yeah.
friends, they're collaborators. So they're always sharing things back and forward. So from that, it was clear that like we really wanted to maintain a single tenant infrastructure that would allow us to, well, uh, single infrastructure for all of our tenants, for all our customers. So then we could have that sort of collaboration much more easily. I mean, you can do workarounds, but it was going to be
Yeah.
messy.
Oh, that's awesome. I mean, that's a good point, right? Like, I mean, the space you're in is so different. Like, it's education space. This online education, which is different. This is classroom education, right? It's like, and everybody's kind of doing the same thing, and the objective is really to serve the next generation. At the end of the day, whatever these teachers do, and my daughter just started going to school, and we have a different app that the school uses for that. And I was just looking at the app, and I felt like it was like not really that great. But I have not. She just started school, so if I, as a parent, go and say, "Hey, you need to start using Kami," it'll be really funny. So at some point, I'm going to pitch it for you guys. But what I felt is, like, my daughter interacts with the app that they have, I mean, there are a lot of things missing in it, like, and I was looking at, I looked at your videos and demos and stuff like that, and I like the fact that you integrate with Google Drive and Docs, and you teachers can go and kind of scribble on top of that, and it makes the whole experience so much more, I would say, real, which you can't do with like typing stuff, so that's pretty interesting.
Yeah, I think like one of the things I think that is a little bit unique about us is there's a lot of as you mentioned, there's Google Docs, there's obviously Word and
But yeah,
365 and the Sheets, and there's a lot of tools out there which are great and do get used in classrooms, but none of those are built for kids. None of those are built for students. When you're asking a 6 or 7 year old to use the same Google Docs interface as in a Fortune 500 company, like their needs are very very different. Um,
I mean,
and
my
what a
my
kid
daughter,
really needs is a
you know
great
my
drawing tool.
my daughter's favorite feature, she's like, where are all the pink colors, so she's looking for colors and something like look like a pencil that she can scribble on top of things, so it's a totally different user experience for sure. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's a great point.
yeah.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. No, you're right. Yeah, it's like the color selection. I mean, even just like great drawing tools. We've invested a lot in drawing tools because that's so important for schools and for students. But Google Docs hasn't really done invested in that much, and I guess that they're focused on a different use case. So it's there's that kind of that thing where I think that by being focused on the education use cases, we can just make like experiences much much better. And we can build like really nice turn-in flows, really nice flows around. So we have the ability for the teacher to choose what functions the student should have available for a certain assignment. So if a teacher is sending out something that's really just about text and drawing, they can just I'll only give the students text and drawing.
Right.
Um, and they can even modify that during the class. So they could say, okay, now you've got past this section. Now I'm going to turn on the insert picture tool and go find a picture and put it in. And that sort of real-time controls just allows a teacher to actually have keep the students on task and keep the students, clear where they need to go, rather than the students coming into a tool with 100 options all turned on and they're trying to find the one that they're supposed
Yeah.
to use. And
Right.
eh, yeah,
Yeah. No, I mean,
um,
it's fascinating. When you were thinking, when you were saying, I was thinking actually, like, I mean, there's some amazing changes happening in the space with AI, right? Like, and OpenAI has this assistant API that is now capable of GPT-4 vision, right? Like, that's the model. And basically, if I show it a photo of a duck and I say, what is this? It can tell me, oh, this is the duck, So I was just thinking, for you guys, I do not know if you're already doing that, but it'd be so cool for you to integrate with something like that, where a kid, like a teacher says, okay, you need to submit these things, make sure you put these diagrams in, and then these diagrams come in. You can use the API to kind of look at these and auto score these, and the teacher's work is kind of reduced, using AI. I don't know if you're doing that already, but yeah, there goes a good idea for you. So I don't know.
Yeah, we're adding a lot of tools around sort of questions and auto scoring and making this
Mm,
much more structured in Cami. And obviously, yeah, that ties into AI very nicely in different ways. It's interesting. Like, there's some things where um, you know you don't want the AI to be integrated in a way that takes away the learning part for the student, and that will be of course. I'm sure lots of debates of which things is it pointless to learn that thing now because AI can just do it. But um, you know we and generally our philosophy on those sorts of things is we are really we are a teacher focused company, so we are sort of we will make those things available for teachers to decide, and they can decide, okay, is this something I want
they want to
my
enable
students
or not.
using?
Yeah.
Yeah, and maybe there's some places where they want to get the students to have experience using AI or experience doing something, so they'll turn it on. And other times, like, no, I really want you to learn this thing, so I'm going to disable that. But yeah, and definitely on the teacher side, I mean, we've seen, and I'm sure you've seen this as well, that the stack of papers to grade, the amount of uh, time like that takes is enormous for teachers, and anything that saves them time is just gets the hugest reactions from our user base. So we're definitely looking at ways that we can use AI to save teachers time. But I think you want to do it in a way that is taking out the busy work, so that then they can give actually more high quality, more first slice feedback. Maybe it's
Right.
some AI is summarizing it for you, but then the teacher's then taking that and recording a video to give back to the student,
Right, right,
which is a much more personal form of feedback. So it's not just like, oh, here's some AI graded thing that, because it's important that the student feels that um, the teacher actually cares about their learning and cares about them progressing, because that's one of the major drivers to learn and to go further.
right. Yeah.
So
Yeah, that's an
yeah.
interesting point because you don't want everything to be done by AI because then the teacher is just like, hey, I'm just going to do a push on what you guys need to do. And it just comes in, AI auto scores it, but the teacher is not really involved in how the kid is progressing. Definitely a good point. And kind of also reveals how much you think about the experience, as somebody who's designing the app and building the company around this idea. Um, I wanted to ask you. I know we are reaching, a little bit of towards the close of the podcast recording today, but there is so much going on, right? Like changes in the market, changes in new software. Every time there is a reinvent. I know you and I were talking about all the different announcements that might be coming up at AWS reInvent. Last month we spoke. I mean, how do you keep up? How do you have like a process within the company to like hear what's happening and look at ideas that you can implement in your tech stack?
So yeah, we get a lot of feedback from, we have a lot of people out on the field talking to teachers and talking to users all the time, and they give us a huge amount of feedback back that we work through. I guess in terms of like changes on the technology side, I certainly spend a fair bit of time on Hack and Use, which may or may not be the most useful way to spend time, but I definitely see things coming up there. And I mean, across the team, engineering team, we always see new things, and we're sort of posting those up and talking about them. And I mean, it is such a sort of rapidly changing capabilities out there. I mean, I think like part of the sort of the philosophy of how I try to approach these things is, I don't think that we are a company or should be a company that is, um, there's some new hot technology, whatever that is, and we're going to integrate it into our product because we want to be associated with this hot new technology, right? Like we could have
Right.
gone like, oh, we're going to input blockchain and NFTs into our product, and it's like, well, does this add value for teachers? That's the question, or not, and that's the question for us. So we absolutely want to use all the latest AI technology, and we will, and we're developing those things. But it's about adding value for students, adding value for teachers, making learning better, and we we don't feel a need to jump onto any particular you know hype
Trend.
train of hype. Yeah, any
Yeah.
particular trend of, hey, everyone's launching AI features this month, you better have your AI feature. It's like, well, does it help teachers? Does it make their lives better, or is it just something cool to put on the homepage and say, hey, look, AI?
Yeah, I mean, half the products in the market, half the emails that I'm getting today has AI. And I was at reInvent, and pretty much every booth I was at was talking about, hey, look at what we do with AI, look at this, at that. And again, what happens is the use case is diluted in that, and
hmm.
the what you're trying to solve kind of get lost. And I'm kind of glad that you are building a company that's focused on solving a very very clear problem, which I believe teachers and students are always going to be there. Here's my opinion on how universities are going to be. I think the way we do universities is going to change, but the way we do schools will remain pretty much the same because we have to go through standard education. And I feel like what you guys are doing at Kami is extremely awesome. And it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you about it, Jordan. For everyone listening, you want to check out what Jordan and his company do, go to kamiapp.com. That's the website, I believe.
Yep.
And they are doing some brilliant engineering work and building this awesome product for the teachers. Jordan, are there any other places where people can come and learn more about what you or your company do, or even like follow you, that you would like to tell everyone?
Yes, it's in the Kami app, is our main site. And yeah, we're on all the different socials as well. There's a Life at Kami Instagram, which is sort of the behind the scenes. So yeah,
Nice.
people can check that as well.
Awesome. Hey, I'm going to be following what you guys do, and I'm going to talk more about this to my mother, who was a teacher, and I'm going to make her kind of more troubled by the fact that she didn't have something like this. And at some point, I'm going to go to my school where my daughter goes and say, "Hey, well, you guys need to start using Kami because I think it's pretty cool." So I'll do
That's
that pitch for you.
yeah, yeah. No, thanks for having me on. This has been great, and
Hey, thank you so much, Jordan. It's been an absolute pleasure. I know the holiday season is coming up, so best of holidays to you, your family, and the company, and all the best to whatever you guys do.
yeah, all the best. Have a great
All
holiday
right,
season.
catch you later.